My husband and I take a photo shoot every wedding anniversary. The 10th anniversary is no exception. The clerk in the photo studio was helping me look through the photos and suddenly spoke. I missed a few of your husband's photos. Here they are. I looked at the pictures. The husband is my husband, but the one wearing the wedding dress is not me. 1. The clerk at the photo studio showed me the photos one by one. The husband is my husband, but the one wearing the wedding dress is not me. It's his secretary, Lily Allen. The two people in the photo are a perfect match, a handsome man and a beautiful woman. They look like a perfect match made in heaven. The groom is mature, steady, and very charming. The bride is young and beautiful like a little bird. She looks up at the groom with little stars in her eyes. The lady boss who was helping me get the photo frame came over, and her face changed when she saw the photo. She immediately reached out and closed the folder on the computer, cursing the clerk under her breath. You're wrong. This guy just looks like Mr. Davis. How could it be him? Mr. and Mrs. Davis are regular customers of our studio. How could they be mistaken? Forget about your bonus this month. The clerk knew he had caused trouble and dared not say anything. I smiled and tried to smooth things over. It's okay, the photos are really nice. I got my husband's photos for him as well. I'll just send him a message and let him know. I took a few photos of the two of them that I thought were the most beautiful and sent them to Richard Davis. I think these photos of you and Lily are the best, so I'll help you choose them. Richard called immediately and explained anxiously on the phone. Honey, don't get me wrong. That day was Lily's birthday. She said she wanted to take a photo shoot to deal with her parents urging for marriage. This is all fake. Don't take it seriously. My birthday wish is to take wedding photos with my boss? Do you think I believe it? The president of Davis Corporation took a wedding photo shoot together to fulfill his secretary's birthday wish. You can really be selected as the top 10 people who touched Jiangcheng. I hung up the phone. After thinking about it, I clicked on Lily's circle of friends. Sure enough, her circle of friends showed her wedding photos that she had just posted yesterday, with the text, "Who could be more suitable than us?" There were a lot of exclamations and comments below. Your husband is so handsome. What a talented man and beautiful woman, what a perfect match. Some people who know the inside story also liked the post below. You are the only one Davis is always willing to play with. You are indeed Davis's favorite. Lily gave a unified reply below. You are not my husband yet, I will try my best. It's great to be young. He was young and frivolous, and he was so proud of himself that he was not afraid of any difficulties and was determined to win. If she hadn't set her sights on Richard, I would have really admired her shamelessness. I moved my fingers, liked and replied to her circle of friends. Why haven't you gotten married yet, since you are such a perfect match? Do you think the Civil Affairs Bureau is too far away? Richard's call came as I expected, and it was filled with anger. Grace Clark, what do you mean? I explained to you that it was just a joke. Did you have to bet on this with a little girl? Do you know how much you embarrassed her in the company by replying in her comment section? Delete your comment immediately and come to the company to apologize to Lily. Lily's nasal voice came from the other side. Sister Grace, I'm sorry, I really didn't mean it. Taking wedding photos was my birthday wish. I thought it was just a joke. I didn't expect you to care. We often joke like this at our age. I forgot that you are much older than me and may not like it. It's all my fault. I'll call the photo studio right away to destroy those photos. I'm sorry. Richard's rage grew. Listen, Lily is 10 years younger than you. And yet she's more sensible than you. She cried so hard and even apologized to you, but you're just aggressive. You're so arrogant. I asked him while holding my breath on the phone. Is it my fault? My husband took wedding photos with another woman. I can't be angry, I can't express an opinion, right? Then you should marry a deaf and dumb person, so that your wife will never know what you did. After saying that, I hung up the phone. 2. Richard didn't come back until almost 12 o'clock in the evening without saying a word. It was like they were entering a Cold War mode. After being married for so many years, I know him too well. Every time I make him unhappy, he starts to use cold violence, not talking or communicating until I give in. He thought I would apologize to him as usual. After all, I loved him so much. In order to be with him, I gave up the smooth life my family had arranged for me, and insisted on leaving my hometown and coming to Jiangqing with him. He said at the time, "In Haicheng, I will always live under the arrangement of your parents. Whenever I succeed, others will say that I am relying on your family's fame. I don't want that." I looked at his stubborn yet handsome face and my heart softened. So I gritted my teeth and fought with my parents for a year, and finally got them to agree to let me leave my hometown with Richard. From living in a basement to now living in the most expensive villa area in Jiangqing. I thought we had everything: status and money. Payan was very good to me, and I was the only one in his heart and eyes. I thought I had my happiness firmly in my hands. But no one told me that happiness has an expiration date. From the moment I found a pair of high heels under Richard's desk in his office, I knew something had changed. I picked up the high heels and looked at Richard. He was a little embarrassed, yet also somewhat doting without realizing it. Lily, that little confused girl, changed her shoes here that day and forgot to take them out. A little secretary goes into the president's office to change into high heels? I laughed sarcastically. "Richard, be careful not to overstep your boundaries." He smiled and said I was narrow-minded. But slowly, I found that the pendants in his car changed from the amulets I prayed for to crystals that young girls like. The cushions changed from low-key luxurious silver gray to colorful cartoons. I knew Richard's vows were beginning to fade. This time he still wanted to use the Cold War to make me surrender. But I'm tired and I don't want to. When I woke up the next day, Richard was waiting for me. He stood in front of the dining table, his face cold. "Come with me to the company today." I looked at him in silence. He said, "Go and apologize to Lily. You are Mrs. Davis. Don't do anything that is unbecoming of your status. You are really amazing to be jealous of a little secretary." I put the glass of milk in my hand on the table and looked at him. "Okay, wait for me to get a gift, so that it will show your sincerity." Richard's expression eased a little and his tone became much gentler. "If only you were so sensible yesterday." When we arrived at the company, Lily stood up immediately when she saw me and timidly called me Sister Grace. Her eyelids were slightly swollen, probably because she cried a lot in front of Richard yesterday. Several secretaries nearby watched silently and prepared to eat melons. I stood in front of Lily with a smile, then looked at Richard. "Yesterday I said you two are a perfect match. I didn't mean anything else. Davis always asked me to apologize to you. I thought it would be most appropriate to give you a gift." Lily shook her head. "No, it's my fault. It's all my fault." Richard comforted her gently. "Your sister Grace has given you an apology, just accept her gift." I patted Lily's hand, opened the jewelry box and took out a ring. The ring is surrounded by a circle of diamonds, which is extremely beautiful. Several secretaries who were watching nearby gasped in surprise. I slipped the ring onto Lily's ring finger and held it up to admire it. "It's so beautiful. Suits you so well. Do you like this gift?" Richard's face behind him changed drastically. "This ring is our wedding ring." At that time he was not as successful as he is now, and such an expensive ring almost used up all his savings. At that time he gave me all his love. Now I don't want him or his love anymore. 3. Lily looked at the diamond ring, her young face full of joy and her eyes shining brightly. She tilted her head to look at Richard. "Mr. Davis, this is too expensive. I can't accept it." Richard walked up to me, grabbed my hand, gritted his teeth and whispered, "Grace, what do you want to do?" I broke away from him, still smiling. "Don't you want to apologize? I did what you asked. This ring is the most suitable, especially for wearing with a wedding dress. Your Lily will definitely be the most beautiful bride, Richard, don't you think?" Richard and I had a simple wedding. It was our first year in Jiangqing and we had nothing. Living together in a damp basement, eating instant noodles together. Sometimes when I get home late after working overtime at the company, I start drooling at the smell of fried noodles from roadside stalls. But a serving of fried noodles costs 10 yuan, and I can't bear to buy it. Richard hugged me and cried one day, "Grace, following me has made you suffer. You are a grown-up lady, why do you have to do this? Why don't you just go home? When I succeed, I will marry you." I covered his mouth and said, "Don't say such things again. I have made up my mind to be with you." He took out some change from his pocket, collected 10 yuan, and bought a serving of fried noodles. We sat on the small benches, each taking a bite. That was the most delicious fried noodles I have ever eaten. The next year, the company's business started to pick up and Richard proposed to me. When we went to register our marriage, we didn't even have a wedding dress. I only had a small veil on my head, not to mention taking wedding photos. When we got the certificate, Richard's eyes were red and he made a promise to me. I will treat you well for the rest of my life. If I ever let you down, I will be poor and unhappy for the rest of my life. Just then, a newly married couple came out with their marriage certificate. The girl was wearing a beautiful wedding dress, and the diamond ring on her finger attracted a lot of attention. Richard lowered his head in shame, but soon looked at me firmly again. I will make you wear the most beautiful wedding dress and the most beautiful diamond ring. We will take wedding photos every anniversary from now on. My wife must have what others have. Richard fulfilled his promise. On every wedding anniversary afterwards, he would take a set of wedding photos with me and buy me a diamond ring. The diamond gets bigger every year, but the one I always wear is the first ring he gave me. Richard knew what the ring meant to both of us, so he panicked. Grace, what do you want to do? I know my tone may have been harsh, but what do you mean by giving your wedding ring away? I laughed. Richard is a man, and he will probably never understand the mystery of wedding dresses. The wedding dress that Lily wore when taking photos with him was only worn by pregnant women. Her little tricks were clearly revealed, and only Richard thought she was a simple little white rabbit who was easily frightened. She has been Richard's secretary for 2 years, and she was the one who made the reservations at the photo studio where we took our photos. She knew I would pick out photos and that I would look at her moments. The poor acting skills of the owner of the photo studio had already betrayed her. How could she let me see the wedding photos of Richard and another woman? There is only one possibility: someone wants me to see it. I looked at Lily, who was jealous behind Richard, and pried open Richard's fingers one by one. Richard, your Lily should be pregnant, right? If you don't get married, the child will be illegitimate. Let's get a divorce. I'll make it happen for you. Richard was horrified and shook his head to deny it. What pregnancy? I don't know what you're talking about. I pointed at Lily. You don't know? Ask your secretary, she knows. After saying that, I turned around and left cleanly. 4. Instead of going home, I went to the river alone. I have been in this city for 5 years, but apart from Richard, I don't even have any other friends. I was so in love that I never thought I would end up like this. I called a lawyer I knew and told her that I wanted a divorce, and that I wanted to get the largest share of the property. After all, even if there is no love, money must be obtained. Love and bread must always be considered equally. This time I chose bread. When I got home in the evening, I was surprised to find Richard there. He was wearing an apron and brought out a pot of soup. Honey, I cooked your favorite dishes and made your favorite soup. Come wash your hands and eat. On the table were spicy chicken, boiled fish, pig lung soup, and stir-fried chrysanthemum. I didn't take chopsticks. What's wrong? Not to your liking. I looked at him and realized that he hadn't been in the kitchen for more than a year. I opened my mouth and said casually, after I got stomach problems, I stopped eating spicy food. Richard was stunned for a moment, as if he remembered that I had stomach problems, and quickly scooped a bowl of soup for me, but I pushed it away. I don't eat pig lungs, don't give me any greens, and I don't eat chrysanthemum either. I stood up and said, eat slowly. See, it's so obvious that I don't love you. He will no longer remember your likes or dislikes. In the past, even if I didn't eat chopped green onions, he would still help me pick them out bit by bit. And now, my likes and dislikes should no longer be within his scope of concern. Richard stood up and grabbed my hand. Honey, I'm sorry. Can you please forgive me? I was just confused for a moment. I really don't have any feelings for her. I looked at him, trying to find traces of the past on his face. But there was nothing. Richard is now mature, stable, charming, and handsome in every move. But he no longer has the sincerity and true love he had before. I asked him softly, do you remember what you said when we got married? You said you would treat me well for the rest of my life and would never let me down, but you forgot everything. Richard, whom I love, only loves me. My heart is small and can only hold him. But now his heart is big and can hold many people. Richard stood up and looked at me with a frown. I just made a mistake that all men in the world would make. I also admitted my mistake to you. Why are you still so stubborn? Why do you want to learn from those jealous women? Why are you so petty? I laughed sarcastically. When others make mistakes, you also make mistakes. Everyone dies, why don't you die? Richard blushed. You are so vicious. Can't we communicate properly? I spread out the divorce agreement and handed him the pen. If you sign this, we can talk properly. Richard grabbed my hand and looked at me with his favorite begging expression. Honey, I really love you. Don't be angry, okay? I can just fire Lily, okay? I looked at him intently and asked, are you willing to never see her again? Including the baby in her belly. When we got married, Richard was in the startup phase and was very busy. Plus, he loves me dearly and doesn't want me to suffer any pain. So he told me that we want to be a dink couple. At that time, he hugged me and said, having you as my baby is enough for me. But now, he said, I don't love her, but I need a child to inherit everything from me. She is young, healthy, and pregnant. Isn't it good that someone else gave birth to your child so you don't have to get out of shape? As long as you agree, I'll bring the baby back to you when she gives birth. As for Lily, just give her some money. I looked at him in disbelief. Lily agrees? Richard smiled, looking confident. You don't understand her. She is a very simple woman. She is with me only because she loves me. She said she doesn't want any status or anything. She will be satisfied as long as she can give birth to a child for me. I nearly burst out laughing. Is Lily a simple woman? She only loves him? She doesn't want money or status. Only now do I realize that Richard is the one who is truly in love. I pulled my hand out of his. But Richard, I think you're dirty. I really want to know what would happen if Lily were with Richard and found out that he had nothing after the divorce. At that time, would she still say that she only loved him? 5. We parted on bad terms. Richard was unwilling to sign the divorce papers, and our divorce was at a standstill. I moved out of our home and started contacting lawyers. Richard seemed to be angry with me and brought Lily to various occasions. Lily's circle of friends is updated every day, with various photos of her and Richard, and all kinds of jewelry Richard gave her. And he posted a hypocritical message. He said I was more precious than a gem. Outside, some people even call her Mrs. Davis. I watched Richard's vague introduction in the video and Lily's proud answer, which gave me endless imagination. I made an appointment to have afternoon tea with the wife of Mr. Moore, one of our major clients. In the past, Richard always entertained various clients, but the maintenance of client resources depended not only on the clients themselves, but also on various personal relationships, such as their wives. Over the years, I have gotten to know every client's wife's preferences very well. I remember that in order to get a big order, I ran all over the city and found the kind of wontons that Mrs. Thompson talked about eating in her childhood. The item is not expensive, but the thought is priceless. Mrs. Thompson ate the bowl of wontons and looked at me with emotion. It's really not easy for you. This thing is hard to find. I'm sorry for that. From now on, Thompson's order will be yours. As for Mrs. Moore, when she had a miscarriage, she was always on a business trip. I stayed with her for a week, and made different chicken and fish soups every day and brought them to her. Richard thought he was very capable, but he didn't know how much effort I had put in behind him. The world is like this, and women's contributions seem to be easily overlooked. Mrs. Moore and I were drinking tea and chatting when we inadvertently saw Lily and a few of her sisters enter the hotel. They were talking and laughing loudly over there. Lily, when are you and Davis going to get married? Yeah, I see Davis always looks at you like an eyeball, it's too corny. Lily answered as she walked. We're still going through the paperwork. Once that old woman signs the divorce papers, Richard and I will get married. When she saw me, she was stunned for a moment and walked towards me. Sister Grace, the prices here are not cheap. Richard works very hard to earn money. She glanced at Mrs. Moore with disdain. You're still inviting people to afternoon tea? Madam, Sister Grace is getting a divorce now, so you better stay away from her. After all, she won't be Mrs. Davis soon. I'm the future Mrs. Davis. Mrs. Moore looked at me and raised her eyebrows. Who is this? I kindly explained it to her. This is Richard's secretary, and also his mistress. She is said to be pregnant with his child. So Richard and I are discussing divorce. Mrs. Moore looked disdainful of Lily. Grace, you should also be careful. Men like to cheat, so you should keep a close eye on them. Don't let him pull anything dirty and smelly into the bed. I don't know how many times he has been in bed. I humbly accepted the advice and said, yes, I trusted him too much. I didn't expect that it would even cause the child to fall out. Mrs. Moore waved her hand nonchalantly. How many children do you want? Just give me some money to send them off. Let me teach you it's better to have your own children. If you can't or don't want to have one, then kill it at the source and make Richard unable to have one. Lily listened to our casual discussion and screamed in anger. You can't hold on to your husband, and you still blame others for taking your place. You have to admit that you are old and ugly, and you have to look for the reason why your husband has changed his mind from yourselves. After all, who doesn't like young and beautiful women? You should know yourselves and give up your seats immediately to avoid making things too ugly. I sneered and stood up. Miss Allen, I am still Mrs. Davis. If you want to move up, please persuade Richard to sign the divorce agreement. Otherwise, it will be embarrassing if you get pregnant. Lily was so angry that she was half dead and was coaxed aside by her sisters. I felt unlucky and didn't bother to pay attention to her. Halfway through afternoon tea, Mrs. Moore went to touch up her makeup and Richard came. Lily cried and threw herself into his arms, tears streaming down her face. Richard, Sister Grace, she. I left my words unsaid, causing Richard to look at me with a frown. 6. He supported Lily and looked at me. I told you I must have a child, why can't you understand me? I think it's ridiculous. What does it have to do with me that you must have a child? Get a divorce first. I won't care whether you have one or not. Lily shook Richard's arm. I have a stomachache. Sister Grace and another old woman just bullied me. I don't understand anything. They kept calling me a mistress. I'm not. Richard, I just love you and want to give birth to a child for you. What's wrong with that? I was too lazy to say anything more to them and turned around to leave. Richard pulled me hard, his face livid. Do you have to make such a scene? And you team up with others to bully Lily. Is that fun? Mr. Davis. Mrs. Moore came back. As soon as Lily saw her, she pulled Richard and acted coquettishly. It was this old woman who bullied me together with Grace. Richard's face suddenly changed and he scolded her. Shut up. He then put on a smile and greeted. Mrs. Moore, what a coincidence to meet you. Mrs. Moore waved her hand and pulled me over to her. I asked Grace to have afternoon tea with me, but your lover had to come over to make things difficult for me. Mr. Davis, I used to think you were good at business, but now it seems that you are not clear-headed at all. I dare not hand over the orders to you again. I'll talk to Mr. Moore when I get home and reconsider this year's orders. Lily felt embarrassed and aggrieved, and yelled at Mrs. Moore. If you don't want to do it, then don't do it. Without your orders, Davis can't survive. Richard, you have to make the decision for me. Mrs. Moore laughed out loud. Okay, you have guts. Then there's no need to think about it, just stop cooperating. After saying that, she took me away. Richard looked at Lily, who was not aware of the danger in front of him, and yelled angrily. Are you crazy? Do you know how many orders Moore has in a year? How much did Davis lose because of your words? Are you crazy? Lily cried. I'm young and don't know anything, why are you so mean to me? When I got home in the evening, I saw Richard waiting for me at the door. There were cigarette butts all over the floor. I guess he had received the notice from Moore that they would cancel the cooperation. Richard saw me and came over to me looking worried. Wife, where have you been? I stepped back. What's going on? I'm just worried about you. If you don't tell me, I'll go home and rest. Can you please plead for me and Mrs. Moore? Richard begged. I turned back to look at him. Plead for you? Why? What's in it for me? Richard gritted his teeth and said, If you can help me, I will sign the divorce. I raised my finger and looked at him with a smile. I want 60% of the property. You are the party at fault. The original 50-50 split won't work. Richard's face darkened. Don't go too far. I shrugged. If you don't agree, forget it. He thought about Moore's order and finally agreed for the sake of the company. Richard signed the divorce agreement and a month later we got the divorce certificate. He stared at me grimly. You promised to ask Mrs. Moore for me. I put away the divorce certificate before answering him. I begged for mercy, But Mrs. Moore didn't want to forgive Lily, so there was nothing I could do. You said people would find a wife who would bring good luck to their husbands, so why did you find a curse star? Richard was furious and said, You are kidding me. I shook my head and chuckled. I was the one who negotiated the Moore deal. It's your fault that it's gone now. You're so capable, why don't you go find clients yourself? 7. Lily was waiting for him at the door of the Civil Affairs Bureau. When she saw us coming out, she came forward and took his arm. Brother Yuan, don't worry. I can do what Grace can do. Once I coax those wives for you, are you still worried about not being able to get those orders? I sneered. Just you, Lily? Ha! The day after I got the divorce certificate, I sold all my Davis shares to the rival company. I can't help but laugh when I think of Richard's expression when he saw his competitor sitting across from him. After that, I used all the funds to start a company, poached employees from Davis, and started to make great progress. Same industry, same resources, I am doing very well. Mrs. Moore came in person when the company opened. She looked at the layout of my company and nodded with satisfaction. I don't have anything to give you as a gift, so I'll just give you the Moore's order. You were the one who did it when I was at Davis's, and I'm confident that I'll leave it to you now. With Mrs. Moore's promotional help, several of Davis's former major clients switched to my company. Suddenly my new company had the momentum to surpass Davis. When Richard called me, he sounded exhausted. I didn't expect you to be so disrespectful of my husband and wife, and actually snatched away my company's clients. I answered him with a smile. Boss Davis, what kind of friendship do I have with you? I was the one who developed these customers. It's normal for them to want to follow me. Customers are not fools. Who would be willing to give orders to someone who is not in a clear mind? After all, the fact that Boss Davis is obsessed with love is known to the industry. Richard roared. Grace, a husband and wife are bound by love for 100 days. Do you really hate me so much? As for, you are a cheating scumbag. What qualifications do you have to tell me that a husband and wife will be grateful to each other for 100 days? I hung up the phone angrily. After that, I devoted myself to my work, but I didn't expect them to come to me for trouble. My assistant rushed into the office, cell phone in hand. Mr. Clark, please read this news. The picture above shows me coming out of the obstetrics and gynecology department, with a middle-aged man following behind me. It was obvious that we had a good relationship, and the angle of the camera made it look like he was half holding me in his arms. The assistant frowned, his face full of worry. It's being said everywhere that you got your business through illegal means. This troll posted a lot of your photos, slandering and spreading rumors based on the pictures. Mr. Clark, do you want to clarify something? I looked through the photos carefully and got an idea. It is obvious that someone deliberately took a secret photo of me and made this kind of news to ruin my reputation and bring me down. There is only one person who can do this. I dropped my phone and shook my head. I'm doing fine, don't worry about it. The online public opinion got out of control and even my parents in Haicheng were alarmed. My dad got mad on the phone. You didn't tell your family about your divorce, and now you're being cyberbullied and you didn't tell your family. Do you still think you have a family? My nose felt sore and my eyes were hot. Dad, I can handle it. I'll come home to see you when this is over. The next day I went to the obstetrics and gynecology department again, and actually met Lily at the door. She saw me and smiled maliciously. What a coincidence, Sister Grace. Why are you here at the obstetrics and gynecology department? Are you pregnant? This is really rare. You are pregnant with another man's child? I looked at them coldly. Does it have anything to do with you? Mr. Davis, keep your wife's mouth shut. Richard grabbed me. You are willing to be so lowly just to make money? Can you please have some? It was too late. When I came out of the hospital and walked into the parking lot, I saw Richard and Lily arguing. Richard, what a good thing you did. You actually dared to secretly take pictures of President Anderson. You are really courting death. Lily, how should I know who he is? I saw him and that bitch together, so I asked someone to take the photo. When I asked someone to post it online, didn't you agree? Now that something has happened, you blame me. Richard pushed her away and said, when the time comes, you will admit that it was your idea. If Davis is implicated by you, I will not be polite to you. As he said that, he opened the car door and prepared to get in. Lily cried and hugged Richard. I'm your wife and I'm pregnant with your child. How could you do this? Are you going to watch me go to jail? Richard ignored her and drove away, leaving Lily crying in the parking lot. Richard is a selfish person, and the person he loves most is always himself. I drove past Lily, rolled down the window and looked at her. Mrs. Davis, why don't you take Mr. Davis's car? Is his passenger seat uncomfortable? I looked at Lily's face turning red with anger and spoke more gently. Don't be angry, or you might get a miscarriage. But it's okay, there's a hospital behind us, and we'll have time to save the fetus. After saying this, I rolled up the car window, hummed a song and drove away. Anderson's legal team was very professional. They quickly identified several people who spread rumors online and directly sued them. The mastermind behind the incident was found to be Lily. When Lily was taken away by the police for questioning, she saw me and fell to her knees. Sister Grace, please forgive me. Can I kowtow to you? I'll compensate you. For the sake of the baby in my belly, please let me go. I stepped back and looked at her. The entire network apologizes, and you personally apologize and explain clearly what you did. Otherwise, I will never forgive you. Lily's face turned red, but she had no choice but to agree to my request. Lily's apology statement was all over the internet, and the onlookers read it with great interest. This woman is a mistress. I thought everyone in Davis knew this. She is still hurting him even though his ex-wife has divorced him. Is she a human being? This woman looks familiar to me. She seems to be the one in our school who seduced a professor to write a paper, and was eventually expelled. She is also called Lily. Same name. Davis was greatly affected by Lily's incident. Some of her scandals from her early years were exposed, and she became a pariah. In order to prevent Lily from dragging him down, Richard actually wanted to divorce her. I found out about this in the hospital. I went to have my stomach problems checked out, and ended up seeing them in the obstetrics and gynecology department. Because Lily was unwilling to sign the divorce papers, Richard had an argument with her and pushed her to the ground, causing Lily to give birth prematurely. Lily's screams of pain echoed throughout the corridor, attracting everyone's attention. Later, I heard that she gave birth to a daughter. She and Richard did not divorce because after she was discharged from the hospital, she actually prepared a bunch of materials to report Richard for tax evasion. Richard was arrested. Lily was unwilling to help him pay the back taxes, so he was directly sentenced. When Lily went to see him in prison, she brought her daughter with her and looked very gentle. Husband, don't worry about going to jail. I will take good care of our daughter. Please sign the divorce agreement. Richard wanted to rush out and fight her to the death. You've hurt me like this and you still want a divorce? Even if I die, I'll take you with me. Lily sneered. You can't disagree, but it will just take some time. If you want your daughter to bear the reputation of having a father in prison, then just delay it. Richard was completely depressed. He had nothing left and his daughter finally became his weak spot. Lily's eyes were full of hatred. She gave birth prematurely and had heavy bleeding. In order to save her life, her uterus was removed. The whole person aged very quickly, as if he had aged a dozen years in an instant. I don't care what happens to them in the future. I slowly moved the company's affairs back to my parents' city. Maybe one day I will find someone I like again, maybe not. But it doesn't matter because I am already happy enough.